two teenagers just turned the world's most beautiful race into a crime scene. Imagine this. You are going 50 kilometers per hour. The road is narrow. The crowd is pressed tight on both sides. Thousands of fans cheering, screaming your name. And then, out of nowhere, someone lunges at you. Not a fall, not an accident, not a misunderstanding. A deliberate, targeted attack. This is not a movie scene. This is not fiction. This happened on live television at the Giro d'Italia 2026. And by the time this video is over, you will know exactly what happened, who did it, why the entire cycling world is furious, and what punishment these two young men are now facing. Stay right there. This story gets darker. Welcome back. If you're new here, this channel covers professional cycling news, race breakdowns, controversies, and everything that happens behind the scenes of the biggest races on the planet.
And today, we are covering one of the most shocking incidents in modern cycling history. Not a doping scandal, not a team controversy, not a crash caused by wet roads or a reckless driver. No. Today we are talking about spectators, fans, physically attacking professional riders in the middle of a Grand Tour stage. Let's set the scene. The Giro d'Italia, or simply the Giro, is one of the three Grand Tours in professional cycling. Alongside the Tour de France and the Vuelta a España, it is considered one of the most prestigious and demanding races in all of sport. It runs for 21 stages over 23 days, covering thousands of kilometres through the stunning landscapes of Italy. Stage 6 of the 2026 edition was a route that cycling fans had been anticipating. The stage ran from Paestum to Naples, a route cutting through some of the most historically rich and visually dramatic terrain in all of southern Italy. Paestum, famous for its ancient Greek temples, to Naples, the birthplace of pizza, the city of volcanic energy and passion. It was supposed to be a day of racing, a day of competition, tactics, breakaways and sprints. Instead, it became a day that no one in cycling will forget for a very long time. Here is what we know based on video footage shared by the race organisation on X.com, formerly known as Twitter, and confirmed by multiple witnesses, team officials and law enforcement. As the Peloton, that large, fast-moving group of professional cyclists, approached a roundabout somewhere along the Stage 6 route, a group of young men were standing on the side of the road. Now, this is completely normal. Millions of fans line the roads of the Giro every single year. They stand meters away from the riders, they wave flags, they cheer, they reach out to high-five their favourite athletes. That is the magic of Grand Tour cycling. No fences, no barriers for most of the route. Just the riders and the people, separated by nothing but mutual respect. But these two young men, they had something else in mind. As the peloton came closer, and remember we are talking about dozens of riders travelling at high speed, two individuals from this group began lunging toward the riders, not stepping back, not getting out of the way. Lunging. Toward them. One of them extended his leg deliberately, a sweeping kick motion, directly into the path of the oncoming cyclists. The other went further. He physically pushed a Red Bull-Bora-Hansgrohe rider. Let that sink in for a moment. And here's the part that nobody is talking about. What almost happened next could have ended a career. Or worse. Keep watching. I need you to understand something before we go further. A lot of people who don't follow cycling might look at this incident and think, okay, two idiots messed around near some bikes. What's the big deal? Let me explain exactly why this is one of the most dangerous things a person can do. A professional cyclist in a peloton is travelling between 40 and 60 kilometers per hour on a flat stage, sometimes more on a descent. At those speeds, a bicycle becomes a projectile. If a rider is hit or pushed, they don't just fall. They go down hard, often taking multiple riders with them in a chain reaction crash. We have seen crashes in Grand Tours that have ended careers. We have seen crashes that have put riders in hospitals for weeks. We have seen crashes that have caused broken collarbones, fractured skulls, road rash so severe it requires skin grafts. In 2021 at the Tour de France, A spectator holding a cardboard sign caused one of the most catastrophic crashes in Tour history, taking down dozens of riders in an instant. People were seriously hurt, and that was accidental. What happened at stage 6 of the Giro 2026 was deliberate, an intentional leg extension, an intentional push, against riders moving at racing speed. This is not a prank. This is not a dare that went wrong. This is assault. Now let's talk about the team that was directly targeted. Red Bull-Bora-Hansgrohe is one of the most powerful and high-profile teams in professional cycling right now. The team carries the Red Bull brand, one of the most recognizable corporate names on the planet, alongside the Bora cycling heritage. Their roster includes some of the most talented riders in the world. We don't yet have official confirmation on the exact identity of the rider who was pushed. Teams have been somewhat protective of this information, likely for legal reasons given that charges have been filed. But what we do know is this: the rider was targeted. He was physically contacted. And in the aftermath, team officials were furious. The Red Bull-Bora-Hansgrohe organization, like every other team in the Peloton, immediately supported calls for accountability. Because when you attack one rider, you attack all of them. Wait, because the response from the race organization, I've never seen anything like it in cycling history. This next part is wild. Within hours of the incident, the official Giro d'Italia race organization, RCS Sport, took to XCOM and posted the video footage of the attack. This was a bold and deliberate move. They didn't bury the story. They didn't try to manage the narrative quietly behind closed doors. They published the evidence for the whole world to see. Alongside the video, they posted a message that became one of the most shared statements in cycling social media history. Respect the riders, respect the race. Simple, direct, powerful. The post exploded. Cycling fans, sports journalists, casual viewers. Everyone was reacting. The video was shared millions of times. News outlets across Europe and beyond picked it up. And the message was clear. This behaviour will not be hidden. This behaviour will not be tolerated. But words on social media were only the beginning. Here is where things get very serious, very quickly. Italian authorities moved fast. 2 individuals, both 19 years old, both local residents from the Naples area, were identified, tracked down, and charged. Now, Italian law regarding assault, obstruction of a sporting event, and endangerment is not light. When you physically attack a person in a public space, whether they are a cyclist, a pedestrian, or anyone else, you are committing assault. When you do so during an officially sanctioned sporting event, a race that has legal authorization from the Italian state, you are also potentially violating laws related to the disruption of public events. And when your actions create a serious risk of injury or death for the person attacked and for dozens of others in the peloton, the severity of the charges escalates significantly. Legal experts in Italy have noted that these 2 young men could face criminal assault charges, charges related to public endangerment, and potential civil liability to the rider, the team, and possibly the race organisation itself. The exact charges are still being processed through the Italian legal system, but the fact that charges were filed at all, and filed this quickly, sends an unmistakable message. This is not a slap on the wrist situation. And here's something almost nobody is asking. Why did they do it? The answer might surprise you, and it changes everything about how we look at this story. Every time something like this happens, and thankfully, deliberate attacks on cyclists are rare, the same question comes up. Why? Why would 2 19-year-old men, standing by the side of the road watching one of the greatest sporting events in the world, decide to lunge at professional athletes going 50 kilometers per hour? We don't have a confirmed statement from the 2 individuals. Investigations are ongoing. They may not even fully understand the severity of what they did. But based on pattern analysis of similar incidents in cycling and other sports, there are several possible motivations. The first is the dare mentality, social media clout. We live in an era where people do increasingly dangerous and stupid things for the sake of views, likes, and viral moments. Someone may have dared them. They may have filmed it themselves. They may have thought it would be funny content. In that mindset, and the danger is abstract. The rider is a blurry figure going past at speed. The reality of what could happen simply doesn't register. The second is group psychology and peer pressure. They were in a group. There were others standing with them. The presence of peers, the excitement of the moment, the rush of 1,000 riders approaching. It creates a kind of temporary suspension of rational thinking. What seems insane in isolation can feel like a spontaneous thrill in a crowd. The third and darker possibility is targeted team rivalry aggression. Red Bull-Bora-Hansgrohe is a team with passionate supporters and equally passionate detractors. Could this have been some kind of misguided team rivalry aggression, targeting a specific rider for reasons connected to fan tribalism? This remains speculative, but investigators will certainly be looking at it. And the fourth, the most charitable interpretation, is simple recklessness with no real intent to harm. They didn't think. They acted impulsively. They didn't understand the physics, the speed, the stakes. They thought it would be a harmless moment of bravado. Even if this is true, it doesn't matter. Recklessness that endangers lives is still criminally actionable. The reaction from the professional cycling community was immediate and unified. Riders, team managers, race directors, cycling federations. Everyone spoke. Current and former professional cyclists took to social media, expressing their outrage. Several riders described their own experiences of feeling unsafe on the road, not just from traffic, but increasingly from the behaviour of certain spectators. The UCI, the Union Cycliste Internationale, the governing body of professional cycling, released a statement condemning the attack and expressing full support for the legal proceedings. Fan organisations in Italy expressed deep embarrassment and shame that this had happened on Italian roads during the most iconic Italian race. Sports media across Europe, from L'Équipe in France to Marca in Spain to Gazzetta dello Sport in Italy, ran full features on the incident. And internationally, in the UK, the US, Australia, cycling outlets that don't normally get mainstream attention suddenly found their coverage being shared by people who had never watched a bike race in their lives. Because this wasn't just a cycling story anymore. This was a story about safety at live sporting events, about what happens when the boundary between spectator and athlete is violated, about accountability in the age of social media. But here's the thing. This is not the first time something like this has happened. The history of spectator attacks on cyclists is darker than you think, and it's actually getting worse. I'll break it all down in just a moment. To understand why the cycling world reacted so strongly to this incident, you have to understand the context. Grand Tour cycling has a complicated relationship with crowd behaviour. On one hand, the open road format, the closeness of fans to athletes, the festival atmosphere. These are the things that make cycling unique and magical. They are part of the sport's soul. On the other hand, that same closeness creates vulnerability. In 2021, at the Tour de France Stage 1, a spectator holding a large cardboard sign stepped out from the crowd and directly caused a massive crash that took down a huge portion of the peloton. The spectator had her back to the road, was waving the sign for a TV camera, and had no awareness of the approaching riders. The crash was catastrophic. Multiple riders suffered serious injuries. The spectator fled the scene. She was eventually identified, arrested, and charged. Throughout the history of the Giro, there have been repeated incidents of fans grabbing riders' arms, pushing them up climbs uninvited, throwing objects, setting off flares in the middle of the road, and creating dangerous conditions on mountain passes. Female riders in particular have reported incidents of harassment from male spectators during races, including inappropriate touching and deliberate interference. The pattern is clear. Every few years, there is an incident that shocks the cycling world. Measures are discussed, promises are made, and then slowly, the memory fades, security reverts, and the cycle continues. The 2026 Stage 6 attack may be the breaking point that finally forces systemic change, or it may not. That is the uncomfortable truth that no one in race organisation wants to say out loud. Here is the fundamental challenge facing race organisers when it comes to spectator security. The Giro d'Italia, like the Tour de France and the Vuelta, covers thousands of kilometres over 3 weeks. The riders pass through hundreds of towns and villages. They ride on public roads. The route is announced in advance. Millions of fans know exactly where the peloton will pass. You cannot fence off every kilometre of road. You cannot put a security guard every 10 metres for thousands of kilometres. You cannot screen every spectator who stands on a public road. This is not a stadium event where you control entry points. This is not a closed circuit where you manage perimeter security. This is Italy. Open roads, ancient villages, mountain passes, narrow streets. The logistical challenge is almost impossibly complex. What organisers can do is increase police and steward presence at known high-risk points. Roundabouts, narrow corridors, sprint finishes, steep climbs. They can use video monitoring and rapid response, as was done effectively in this case, with footage captured and charges filed quickly. They can work with local municipalities to enforce crowd behaviour laws. They can implement stricter penalties, making it loudly, publicly, repeatedly clear that attacking riders is a criminal offence. And they can run education and awareness campaigns, reaching fans before the race through social media, through Italian television, through schools and community organisations. None of these are perfect solutions, but together, they can make a difference. And what most people don't realise is, the riders themselves have been asking for these changes for years. One quote from a former champion about rider safety is going to hit you hard. Coming up right after this, professional cyclists have been vocal about crowd behaviour for years, long before this incident, long before stage 6. The general sentiment that runs through the cycling community is this: we love the fans, we need the fans, but we also need to go home safely. The unique intimacy of road cycling, the thing that makes it so special, is also the thing that makes it uniquely dangerous. In other major sports, athletes are separated from spectators by barriers, security teams, distance. A tennis player is on a court. A football player is on a pitch surrounded by advertising boards. A Formula One driver is inside a steel cage going 300 kilometers per hour. Even their fans on the road are behind massive fences. A Tour de France rider, a Giro rider, they are inches from the crowd. There is nothing between them and the public except an unspoken agreement of respect. And when that respect is violated, when that agreement is broken, the consequences can be devastating. Riders have spoken about the anxiety of mountain climbs in particular, where fans crowd both sides of a narrow road, and the noise and chaos can make it genuinely difficult to focus, to steer, to breathe. They have spoken about the flares, the smoke bombs that some ultras set off alongside the route, filling the air with coloured smoke and making it temporarily impossible to see. They have spoken about the grabbing, the pushing, the uninvited physical contact that happens far more often than the public realises. This Stage 6 incident is the extreme end of a spectrum that riders deal with every single day of a Grand Tour. In the aftermath of the attack, several concrete changes are being discussed within the cycling world. The first is mandatory exclusion zones at key points. At roundabouts, narrow chicanes, sprint finishes, and other identified high-risk locations. A mandatory barrier zone where spectators must remain a minimum distance from the road. The second is criminal charges as standard practice, not exception. What the race organisation did, immediately filing charges against the two attackers, should become standard operating procedure. Zero tolerance. Every incident investigated. Every perpetrator pursued legally. The third is public awareness campaigns, integrated into broadcasting. Before every stage broadcast, a clear message to fans about legal consequences of interference. In Italian, multiple times, impossible to miss. The fourth is dedicated security teams at spectator clusters, using race data and social media monitoring to identify where large groups of spectators are expected, and pre-positioning security personnel at those locations. And the fifth is fan banning mechanisms, similar to football's banning orders. Individuals convicted of interfering with riders could be legally barred from attending future race stages. Will all of these be implemented? Some, certainly. Others may face resistance from local authorities, from cost pressures, from the logistical reality of organising a race across an entire country. But the conversation is happening, loudly, publicly, at the highest levels of the sport. Okay, so what actually happens next to these two 19-year-olds? Because what Italian law allows for in a case like this is frankly eye-opening, and it could set a precedent for every future race. Don't go anywhere. Let's spend some time on the legal dimension of this case. Because it matters, not just for these two individuals, but for what it signals to anyone thinking of pulling a similar stunt in the future. Under Italian law, The relevant charges that could apply include lesioni personali, personal injury, and assault. Even if the rider who was pushed was not severely injured, the act of intentionally making harmful contact with another person is an offence. If there was any bruising, any fall, any physical consequence, the charge escalates. There is also violenza privata, private violence and coercion, deliberately using physical force to interfere with another person's freedom of movement or activity. Then there is interruzione di pubblico servizio, disruption of a public service. Officially authorised sporting events fall under public service classifications in Italy. Deliberately disrupting them is a separate criminal offence, and getido pericoloso di cose, dangerous endangerment. If the leg extension or push created a risk of serious harm, even if it didn't result in a crash, this can be charged as dangerous endangerment. Beyond criminal charges, Red Bull-Bora-Hansgrohe and the affected rider could bring a civil lawsuit seeking damages for physical, psychological, and professional harm. Here's what this means practically. These two 19-year-olds, who may have thought they were pulling off a harmless bit of bravado, are now looking at the very real possibility of criminal records, fines, potential prison sentences, even if suspended for first-time offenders, civil damages running into significant sums of money, and a permanent mark on their lives that will follow them professionally and personally. This is the real consequence of that 3-second lunge. Let's zoom out and think about the bigger picture. The Giro d'Italia is more than a race. It is a cultural institution. Italy's pride, a celebration of human endurance, of athleticism, of the beauty of this remarkable country. For millions of Italians, and hundreds of millions of cycling fans globally, it represents something precious. When incidents like this happen, when the headline about the Giro is not a spectacular mountain finish or a dramatic sprint, but an assault on a rider, it damages the race's reputation. It embarrasses the host country. It makes international broadcasters and sponsors nervous. And for the riders, the men and women who train for years, who sacrifice their bodies for this sport, who pour everything they have into competing at the highest level, they deserve better. They deserve to race without fear. They deserve to trust that the road is safe. They deserve fans who understand that their love for the sport should never, ever translate into endangering the athletes they claim to admire. The good news, if there is good news in this story, is that the response has been exactly right. The race organisation didn't hide. They published the video. Law enforcement didn't hesitate. Charges were filed immediately. The cycling community didn't stay silent. They spoke with one voice. And maybe, that swift, unified public response will be enough to make the next potential idiot standing by the road think twice. Maybe. Before I wrap up, I want to share something that almost brought me to tears when I read it. A statement from a professional rider about what it feels like to race through a crowd when you don't know if you're safe. It's the most human thing I've read in sports this year. Imagine training for 10 months, sacrificing sleep, sacrificing relationships, sacrificing food, comfort, normalcy, living on altitude camps and training schedules, and race calendars. You do all of this because you love cycling, because competition calls to you, because you want to stand on a start line in Italy, with the sun on your face and the crowd roaring and give everything you have. And then, in the middle of that, in the middle of your life's work, someone grabs you, pushes you, tries to bring you down, not a rival, not a competitor, a spectator, someone who came to watch you race, and decided in one reckless moment to become part of the story by nearly destroying yours. Professional cyclists are some of the toughest human beings on the planet. They race through injuries that would hospitalize most people. They descend mountains in the rain at 80 kilometers per hour, with nothing but a thin layer of lycra and a foam helmet between them and the road. They are not fragile, but they are human, and they are vulnerable, in a very specific, unique open road way that no other sport demands. They deserve our respect, they deserve our admiration, and above all, they deserve our restraint. Watch, cheer, wave your flag, scream their names, but keep your hands and your feet to yourselves. Let's bring it all together. Stage 6 of the Giro d'Italia 2026, Paestum to Naples. Two 19-year-old men made a decision that lasted 3 seconds and will affect the rest of their lives. One extended his leg into the path of a fast-moving Peloton. One physically pushed a Red Bull-Bora-Hansgrohe rider. The race organisation captured it on video and published it publicly. Charges were filed. Legal proceedings are underway. The cycling world reacted with unified outrage. And a conversation, long overdue, about rider safety, spectator behaviour, and accountability is now louder than ever. This story is not over. As legal proceedings continue, more details will emerge. This channel will keep following it. If you found this coverage valuable, hit the like button. It genuinely helps this channel reach more cycling fans who care about the sport and about the people who dedicate their lives to it. Subscribe if you haven't already. We cover the Giro, the Tour, the Vuelta, and every major cycling story as it breaks. And drop a comment below. Do you think the charges filed are strong enough? What more should be done to protect riders? I read every comment, and I genuinely want to know what you think. Until next time, respect the riders, respect the race.